Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening. Welcome back to AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again for making this one of the most downloaded podcasts about the future of work. If you enjoy what we do, please like, comment, and share in your favorite podcast app. And we'll keep sharing great conversations like the one we have for today. I'm your host, Dan Turchin, advisor at Insight Finder, the system of intelligence for IT operations, and CEO of PeopleRain, the AI platform for IT and HR employee service. First up, in our new AI Fact of the Week segment, according to McKinsey's State of AI survey, 49% of 2,400 respondents said that as of the end of 2020, at least one function within their organization had already been implemented using at least one application of AI. Shocking how that stat has grown even since 2020, but 49% that far back is still pretty impressive. Now, shifting to this week's great conversation, roll back the clock to January of 2022. Fortune published an article that explored the connection between AI and productivity. It's a great read. Go look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. Specifically, it seeks to define the optimal ways for machines and humans to collaborate to optimize business outcomes. More technology isn't always the answer. We recently discussed the Hawthorne effect on this show, which was based on seminal research performed at the Hawthorne Works manufacturing facility in Illinois in the 1920s. It turns out improved lighting didn't lead to improved productivity, but being monitored by researchers did. This controversial finding has been tested and analyzed for nearly 100 years. Technology evolves, and so does human behavior. It's a fascinating field that will be the basis of new careers, new research, new workplace innovation, and of course, new technology for at least the next 100 years. Well, today we're lucky to have the author of that recent Fortune article. It really is my pleasure to have Francois Candelon on the show. He's an authority in the field of AI, having dedicated his career to exploring the cultural implications of new technology. Francois is the global director of the BCG Henderson Institute, Boston Consulting Group's think tank dedicated to exploring and developing insights from business and technology. He's also a leader of BCG Gamma's data science and advanced analytics unit for tech, media, and telecom companies. Francois joined BCG back in 1993. His research focuses on AI and digital as a source of competitive advantage. He is quite renowned. He's been a speaker at global conferences like Mobile World Congress, TED at BCG, the Web Summit, and Politico's AI Summit. And without further ado, it really is my pleasure to welcome Francois to the podcast. Francois, let's get started by having you share a bit more about your background and how you got into the space.
So actually, you said almost everything. So what I just want to add maybe that over my 30-year career at BCG, I've been working extensively, of course, in Europe, in different countries in Europe. And I spent 7 years in China from 2012 to 2019, where I've been working with the most famous tech companies. So I think that what it brings me is the ability to have a global perspective on what AI is about.
Your Fortune columns are a must-read for anyone interested in AI and the future of work. You've studied so many different companies and cultures. Pick one that you would say best exemplifies AI done right.
So I think that, of course, I could take many tech-native companies, but I would like to take Repsol. Repsol is a Spanish oil and gas incumbent, meaning a traditional company in a traditional industry. I won't say in a traditional country. And I think that what is great with them is that since 2018, they've deployed more than 200 AI-enabled programs from the upstream drilling operations, where they have been able to multiply by two the productivity, down to personalized offers in the gas station. So they issue, when you enter the gas station, you will have a different perspective, a different offer, and it helped them increase their revenues by 5%, which is really, really massive. So I think that I would take this one because for two reasons. The first one, as I said, because it's a traditional company that embarked this opportunity on one hand, and second, because the way they did it is that they embraced a critical mass of change. And I think that AI is to a certain extent a technology that you experience. And if you want to get both the financial benefits and the cultural benefits of deploying AI, you need to have this critical mass of change.
So let's say not Repsol, but another organization, maybe in another traditional industry, approaches you and says, look, the board asked us what our AI strategy is. Two questions for you. One, what is an AI strategy? And two, where do you even start?
So I think that this question is very important because you need to understand first that AI has some specific characteristics. The way I explain them is more about the fact that I give four characteristics. The fact that you can be ultra granular, that you can have real-time decision making and on many decisions, the fact that you can have scale at zero marginal cost, the fact that you have continuous learning, it's always progressing and improving. And therefore, I think that what you need to do when you start a strategy is to look at these four characteristics and ask yourself, how should I redesign my business model with this? And you can do that. For instance, John Deere does it with the customers, with the farmers, providing tools and so on. Then you need to say, okay, how should I rethink my objectives? And how can I optimize them? And if I take, for instance, Starbucks, that went, thanks to AI, that switched from serving orders as fast as they could to serving orders at the right time with AI predicting the customers' arrival times. So I think that with this is the way you need to think about the strategy. But I would like to add one additional point, which is that instead of asking yourself, how should I put, how should I how should I use AI to improve my processes? You need to ask yourself, how should I redesign my processes to put AI at the core, to maximize what I call the human plus AI system? And let me give you one example in the which is I think quite interesting in the money transfer industry. The incumbent used AI to reduce their cost, to improve their processes, and they were very successful at that. They reduced it by 70%. That's massive. What else? But at the same time, they were disrupted by a digital native that redefined the business model of the industry, making sure that predicting, thanks to AI, the demand. And as they were predicting the demand, it was not even needed for you to transfer money from one country to the other. So therefore, it was 80 to 90% cheaper. And now Wise, this company, has been able to grasp more than 40% of the market, money transfer market in the UK, for instance. So I think that this is really about that, the ability to think and to be bold and to embrace this AI critical mass of change, putting AI at the core of your processes.
So you say AI can help achieve scale at zero marginal cost. I think that's a very eloquent way of talking about how you'd frame an AI strategy. But I got to push back on that because it seems like magic. And I know that in my business, oftentimes I'm educating customers or prospective customers that AI is not magic. It's extracting insights from historical data to predict future events. Now, when you think about some of the ways that clients of BCG or organizations you talk to have maybe unrealistic expectations about what AI can do, how do you balance that kind of unbridled optimism with a level of pragmatism about what gains can be achieved.
Yes, I agree with you on the fact that people, I would say the most stupid thing I've heard very often is to say artificial intelligence is intelligence. No, it's not intelligence. It's a technology. It's based on data. As you said, we had very interesting experience about that at the beginning of the COVID, given the fact that all the algorithms were trained on data that were not useful, and where we found that it might be even more interesting to have broad and apparently not related data, but that were fresh. So breadth and freshness was better than gold. So it was a kind of a data alchemy, if you want. So I think that's one thing. The second thing, regarding your question, more specifically, is to make sure that we take and we think about human plus AI as a system. This is very important because at the moment, as AI cannot do everything, cannot predict everything, is not 100% reliable, you need to embark human as well. And I think that you need to embark them at two moments. First, when you try to implement it, you need to embark them. And I give you one example with Pernod Ricard, the wine and spirits company. Sorry, it's French, but of course I have a kind of a bias. And really, they decided to use AI to drive their own sales. And we started with a case where we were optimizing their salespeople's store visits. And we were expecting that we would have some, let's say, resistance. I would not say a revolt, but we are in France, so maybe a strike. And but nothing like this happened. And why? Because Pernod Ricard fostered the trust by making sure that AI would be seen as additive, at augmenting the salespeople, not replacing their experience and knowledge. And for that, they were ready to have and willing to have, on one hand, making sure that making sure that they were making a trade-off between accuracy versus explainability. They wanted the people, the sales force, to really understand the decisions that were made. And to a certain extent, we were losing a bit in terms of the full potential of AI, but adding a lot on human plus AI. So it was extremely powerful, and beyond the results we got in terms of performance, it had a very positive impact on the culture as well. So embarking. So this is the first element. And the second is that you need to make sure that you think human plus AI, otherwise you might recreate the Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. Because in many cases, what we see that there is excessive oversight. Employees can feel a kind of isolation. They are, let's say, they take the leftover tasks, which can create, for instance, we had the experience with Amazon that since then has changed, but they had many accidents in their warehouses, and so on and so on. And there is one, but for these three, there is an easy way to solve that. There is one thing that is maybe less easy, which is the dependence that we get on AI, because we all know and we all say that AI will have to get supervised. But over time, how do you make sure that you have the right learning curve for people to be able to disagree with AI? To say, no, AI, this recommendation is wrong. There was, let's say, a famous department store in the UK that all the sales were stopped because the AI system said, okay, we were hacked because people are just buying shirts and T-shirts. It was at the beginning of the COVID. So you needed, let's say, of course, a human to do that. But that one is easy. But for many others, it's much less easy. And I give you one more example. We deployed an algorithm at a company, and we knew based on the data that we had that the accuracy would be around 80%. 6 months later, we came to that place, and the accuracy, that's fantastic. It's 97% right. And it could not be right. So it was really because people were trusting AI much more than they should. So for me, this is one of the key challenges, to make sure that we will drive this, that we will make sure that we avoid this dependence and that we can supervise AI properly.
What's required to gain the public's trust in AI? So often I hear mentions in the popular press that instill fear in people about this kind of silly notion of the bot apocalypse, or the bots are coming to take your job. I prefer to refer to AI as augmented intelligence, and I prefer, like you do, to talk about the synthesis of human intelligence with machine intelligence. But not everyone thinks the way you and I do. What's missing? How can we change the public perception of AI?
So I think there are several things. The first one is through education. And here I would like to highlight what the Finnish government has done. They've developed MOOCs, online courses on AI, and they were targeting around 1% of the population. Now they are close to 20%. And I think that, as we all know, the more you know, the less you're scared. So it's one way to understand, thanks to education, what can be done, what cannot be done. And here governments can play a critical role. Education can play a critical role. So this is one thing. But then I think that some other people will tell you, okay, a way to earn trust on AI is about, let's say, responsible AI, making sure that it's fair, transparent, explainable, replicable, and so on. All of that is very important. But I think it's not enough. I think we need to use what I would call a social license to operate AI. So with 3 pillars. This one on responsible AI. The second is the cost benefit. And that one can actually be different depending on the regions. When I was living in China, I've been working for, let's say, a series of hospitals and equipment, medical device companies that were really pushing to have AI in Western China. And in Western China, one of the key issues we face is the lack of good doctors. Therefore, AI was seen not as an enemy on privacy and so on, but as something enabling to have good diagnostics in Western China. So I think that we need to realize that the cost-benefit perception or pillar might differ by region. And the third one is the fact that you need to trust the company in charge of doing it. And it's one of the issues we face, for instance, with self-driving cars. People trust incumbents in the fact that they can create reliable mechanical vehicles, but they are not convinced that these car manufacturers are able to develop digital self-driving technologies. And to a certain extent, this explains why, because with AI, we are expecting more from AI or technologies than we are from humans. So you have that for as soon as you have one car accident with a self-driving car, everyone needs to stop. While unfortunately many car accidents on our highways. And this is one thing. There was this question about recruiting, the Amazon algorithm. It's the same. It's not easy to. I've been doing recruiting, and to say that the same person but giving the same answers, but at a different moment of the day, depending whether I had a good or a bad day, if it was in the morning or the afternoon, I would not claim that I would have given all the time the exact same grading. So I think that this is why I'm pushing to have this. So education on one side and social license on the other, with the 3 pillars I mentioned.
I know you discussed those 3 pillars of the social license in the February article that you published in Fortune, and I'll make sure I link to it in the show notes. That was a great article. I hope more people read it. Now, shifting to the technology behind AI, what do you think is the biggest impediment to broader adoption or broader acceptance of AI technology? Is it lack of data? Is it lack of engineers, ingenuity, concerns about privacy? But what do you think?
So, in my opinion, this is the tech gap in companies. And when you look at, I was at TED, let's say earlier this month, and I think it was you had Andrew Ng making a TED talk on democratization of AI, and I think it's quite interesting because I follow this perspective, and I would try to go even one step further. When you look at incumbents, they face many hurdles. The fact that they lack tools tailored for their specific industry. Second, they lack talents to bridge the tech gap. And there is an immense cultural change that is required. And being in China, I've studied a little bit more this because we did with MIT SMR a survey last year that was showing that AI adoption in China for traditional companies was significantly higher than in Europe and in the US. And when we try to understand why, it's because they have developed what I would call vertical industry-specific ecosystems, where you have the tech giants like Alibaba, Baidu, or Tencent being the orchestrator and providing tools or libraries that are useful. Then you have a new type of players that I call transformers. If you have a better name, I'm willing to take it, which are companies that both master the technology, AI is a technology, but they deeply understand a vertical industry. And therefore, they are able to bridge the gap I was mentioning. They tailor and they use the tools and libraries from the tech giants, but they tailor them to that industry. Second, they have more data scientists. They have more talents because when you're a data scientist, you don't want to join a traditional company that won't be able to, where AI or tech is not at the core of them. So here you have that, and because they know the vertical industry, not only they provide these talents, but they can as well help you as a traditional company upskill your non-digital talents. So and for them, what they do, they provide these tools. They help the traditional companies embrace the change and the technology, and in return, they get more data that help them develop and improve their algorithm. And these new ecosystems it's actually win-win-win. It's win for the tech giant that will sell or will see their tools, let's say, used more. It's win for the transformers, and it wins for the traditional companies that now are much more competitive. And what is interesting is that in Europe, for instance, we have this type of people, this type of companies, these transformers. But as they are much smaller, basically the traditional companies don't trust them. And I think that it will be very important to find a way to find the orchestrators of these vertical AI ecosystems. So in my opinion, this is critical to democratize AI.
You and I share similar beliefs about what it means to practice responsible AI. A lot of, at least startups, I'm here in Silicon Valley, and I know that there's this perception that practicing responsible AI is somehow a tax on innovation. I think, like me, you probably disagree, but get in your soapbox and make the argument for why practicing responsible AI is not a constraint on innovation, and in fact, it's an important way to think about bringing new technology to market.
I think it's related to what I was discussing previously. If you don't practice responsible AI, it's almost impossible for you to get human adoption of AI at a large scale. So I think that maybe as a startup you will be able to innovate and so on, but at the end, it's very difficult to have this accepted by others, and especially because you are facing very often difficult trade-offs at the company between yes, profit and reputation. What the risk you might get? Look, for instance, at the Microsoft chatbot that was in 2016 that became anti-Semitic in a couple of days. So I think that as AI is not stable by definition, it is continuous learning. You absolutely need to have some frames to avoid and some human supervision to avoid it. And this is under this limit that you will have innovation. Otherwise, I think it will be difficult. However, this said, I think that there is a question about regulation, and regulation is coming. It won't be a global regulation, but we've seen with GDPR that even when not global, it can be then applied, let's say, everywhere, as it is difficult to differentiate data where they are consumers and so on. But I think that for that, I prefer the way the Chinese or the Americans do regulation, which is much more practical. Let's make innovation happen. Let's see where the problems are, and let's try to regulate them. In Europe, unfortunately, we try to think ex ante at everything, all the issues we might face. We are very often wrong in both sides, in putting too many hurdles on things that are not that important, and too little or too few on things that might be critical. So regulation is coming. We need it, but let's try to find a way to practice this right. I was the other day at BEREC, which is the forum between telco regulators in Europe and telcos, and it was one of my points. As you see that telco infrastructures will be considered as highly critical, meaning that you will have many hurdles to do that. It could have a negative impact on innovation.
Now, with regard to regulation, I believe there will be a time soon when any technology that incorporates automated decisions will have, call it like a hygiene score. Kind of like when you go into a restaurant, you can see a hygiene score and you make your decision about whether or not you want to eat food that comes from that kitchen based on the score. Is that an appropriate way to measure whether or not the vendor practices responsible AI, or is there a better way to regulate AI?
No, I think it's a good idea. The question is, how will you measure it over time, and how are you sure that you bring these elements? And to a certain extent, the way the EU is trying to regulate it with these different levels of criticality is a bit similar, but in a more abstract way. I think that we need to have and to get maybe ideas or inspirations from compliance, like what we have in banks and so on, because this is probably something we need to create. We need to better understand how to be compliant, making sure that your top management is accountable as well, that you are trained, that you have diversity of ideas, and so on. So I think that it is very important. Every company probably should have a board, an AI supervisory board, but not in a sense. It's not that easy. You've seen probably that it took 8 days to Google to stop it, but I think that we need something along these lines, which is inspired by compliance, what was done for risk in banks, and to avoid systemic issues. I think it will be a very important opportunity.
I mentioned at the top of the show that only about half of all organizations say that they've used AI in at least one application or process. And my concern is, what about the other half? It seems like just market forces alone would force every company to be investing in AI-driven automation. What do you think is going to be required to force the other half to adopt AI, and when do you think it'll happen where we can confidently say, every organization is using AI?
But I think that we see very different ways in, let's say, in the US, in Europe, in China. I think that in China, as I mentioned, you have the emergence of these vertical industry AI ecosystems, whose objective is really to accelerate the use of AI by traditional companies to democratize AI. I think that in the US, you have, on one hand, a traditional Schumpeterian creative destruction cycle, where basically I think that companies that are not evolving will be replaced by digital native companies, or by the ones that will have made that change. And it will be easier for you. I think that in Europe, unfortunately, given our labor laws, we might be, let's say, let's say, a bit behind. But I think this is absolutely critical. I often refer to Michael Porter's quote on the competitiveness of nation, when he was saying the competitiveness of a nation depends on the ability of its industry to innovate and upgrade. I think that with AI, we have a lot of innovation, but I think that what is critical now is to make the traditional companies upgrade, as you say. And here, I haven't found any better solution so far, and I'm really welcoming any other example than this vertical industry AI ecosystems. There will be as well some other things like the low code, no code, and so on, but it asks additional questions. It's not always easy to, let's say, a no code is a black box on a black box. So we need to be careful with it because it could be against the social license. There is one more point to continue on this and how to make these companies try to emerge, which is how to train their C-suite. And to a certain extent, what would be good would be to have a kind of an AI driver's license, because it will be very difficult for these people to actually embark into that change. It's like when you start skiing at 50, you're much less agile than your kids who are 10. So I think it's something very important, because we need to understand that for these people, it's beyond a change. It touches their own identity. They were selected on the basis of something that they knew because they went through some learning curves and so on. And now they are attacked on that. So, and they don't know exactly, and they are worse in taking decisions than people 2-3 levels below. So it's very difficult. And I give you one example. With telcos, we have developed a great AI algo that allows you to offer the right product at the right time to an individual. And as you all know, so far, telcos are using campaigns before the Christmas Eve, campaigns before Easter, whatever. They have campaigns. But here, basically, you don't need a campaign anymore. It is if you want to keep the word campaigns, you call it an always-on campaign. And we were doing that, and we had great pilots. The results were just fantastic. But the chief marketing officer told us, but guys, I know how to run campaigns. Here, what you propose is for me to change all the marketers, and instead of creating campaigns and pushing campaigns, they will have to think about, to have ideas to test, and that then could be developed and implemented in your AI algo. We don't know. I don't want to change. So this is why very often when you look at the efforts we used to say that it's 10% about the algo, 20% about the infrastructure, but 70% is about the change management. And this change management is very different from the change management of the digital transformation because it touches your identity as a human, your identity as a worker, because here it's not just a digital transformation, is just the outsourcing of some task of your workflow. And basically, you are worried depending on the percentage of the tasks that are outsourced, and therefore you will get replaced or not. But here in AI, it drastically changes the way you take your own decisions. So it augments yours. It tells you that you were wrong. It picks up emotions to tell you how you should have handled that call. So it's much deeper, much, much deeper.
So you're talking to thousands of people who are interested in being a part of the future and who appreciate the role that AI will play in the future. And as the ambassador for AI, which I'm going to anoint you, the global ambassador for AI, right here, Francois. I want you to tell anyone who's thinking about how to embrace AI and kind of establish a healthy human-machine collaboration to benefit, their career and hopefully, all of society. What would you tell them they should be learning today that will enable them to be a leader who's embracing these kinds of innovations in, let's say, a decade?
So first of all, I would like to congratulate them because they are listening to this podcast. Because for the others that are not willing to learn about AI, basically they're already obsolete. So this is the first one. And for this category of people, I would tell them, guys, it's great to learn about AI, but AI is a tool that is here to solve issues, business issues very often. So you need to walk on both legs, technology, business, technology, business. So what I would do is that try to be, let's say, a humanist in having both legs. Of course, you need to look at AI, but think about the issues you want to solve. And with this combination, you will become leaders, let's say, the leaders of tomorrow, no doubt.
I'm going to replay that one back after this. I love that answer. That was such a nice way to say it. Francois, the time has flown by, but that's all the time we have for this episode. I mentioned to the listeners, go out and read your column in Fortune. It comes out once a month. Anything else you want to share about where the listeners can follow you and your work in more detail?
So they can follow me on LinkedIn, and I'm very happy to welcome them. They can follow me. I have articles in, let's say, more scientific publications, like in, of course, HBR, but strategy science or other things which are really more for academic people. And they can just reach out to me. And very happy because I think that we're at the beginning of the S-curve. This is a moment when things are happening, and therefore we need to confront ideas with practice. And this is exactly what I'm trying to do every day. But the more we are, and the more I hear from them and I learn from them, the better.
This is such an important conversation, and we really are just getting started. I hope you'll come back sometime and continue this. Would that be okay?
Whenever you want.
Excellent. Well, Francois, this has been so much fun. Thanks for hanging out. And that's all the time we have for this week on AI and the Future of Work. But this is your host, Dan Turchin, signing off. And of course, we'll be back next week with another fascinating guest.